One moment, I was the happiest man alive. The next, my wedding was in flames. A shocking interruption turned my perfect day into a nightmare I never could have imagined. I used to think wedding horror stories were the kind of thing you laughed about on the internet. Ridiculous, over-the-top disasters that happened to clueless grooms or unlucky brides. A cake falling over, a drunk uncle making a scene, an ex crashing the reception. Stuff that made for great Reddit posts but never actually happened to people like me. I had planned every detail of this day, down to the second. I was marrying the love of my life and nothing, not the weather, not bad luck, not some stupid last-minute mishap, was going to ruin it. And for a while, it didn't. The ceremony was perfect. The kind of perfect that made me believe in fate. In all those cheesy rom-com moments where time slows down and everything feels surreal. My bride, Natalie, walked down the aisle like something out of a dream, her dress catching the golden glow of the afternoon sun. My heart pounded as I held her hands, barely hearing the officiant's words over the rush of emotions flooding my brain. We said our vows, exchanged rings, kissed to thunderous applause. I was finally married to the love of my life. The reception was just as flawless. A ballroom glowing with candlelight, guests laughing, the clink of champagne glasses echoing off the walls. People kept coming up to tell us how beautiful everything was, how we were the perfect couple, how they had never seen a wedding go off without a hitch. I was floating on a cloud of bliss. Then came the cake, a 5-tier masterpiece, ivory frosting adorned with intricate floral designs, standing in the center of the dance floor like something out of a magazine. The catering staff wheeled it in with practiced grace, and a collective gasp of admiration spread through the crowd. This was supposed to be one of those sweet, sentimental moments, the kind where the couple playfully smears frosting on each other's noses, captured forever in wedding photos. But that's not what happened. Because the second the cake was in place, the top exploded open, and out jumped my sister-in-law, Kayla, wearing red lace lingerie. For a moment, there was only silence. Pure, deafening, stunned silence. Kayla stood on top of our wedding cake, balanced in her stilettos, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her lips curled into a smirk that sent ice-cold dread through my veins. The once laughing, joyful guests were now frozen, eyes wide, mouths hanging open. Then, with a gleam of satisfaction in her eyes, she shouted the words that changed everything. Guess what, everyone? Natalie has a secret. I didn't move. I couldn't move. Beside me, Natalie let out a small, choked sound, her face draining of color. I turned to her, expecting to see confusion, anger, something, but she looked horrified. Kayla's gaze snapped to mine. Her smirk deepened. "Sorry, buddy," she said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "But you deserve to know the truth before you spend your whole life with a liar." The room shifted. Gasps rippled through the guests, eyes darting between me, Kayla, and Natalie. The energy had changed. It wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a spectacle. Then, Natalie bolted. I barely had time to process what was happening before she gathered her dress in trembling hands and ran. The doors swung open as she shoved past the guests, her veil flying behind her like a ghostly reminder of the day that was supposed to be ours. The ballroom doors slammed shut, and just like that, my wedding was over. But the worst part? What I found out afterward changed everything. The ballroom felt like a completely different place than it had just minutes ago. The air had shifted, heavy with shock, curiosity, and the kind of silence that only happens when something truly insane has just unfolded. The music was off. The murmurs had started, low at first, then rippling through the crowd as people turned to each other, their voices hushed but frantic. Every single guest had witnessed what had just happened, and now they were waiting to see what I would do. I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about her. Natalie had run. She hadn't stayed to fight back. She hadn't turned to me, outraged, demanding that I shut Kayla up. She hadn't yelled, hadn't defended herself, hadn't even looked at me. She had just grabbed the hem of her dress and bolted, disappearing through the doors like a thief caught in the act. A heavy weight settled in my stomach as I turned toward Kayla, who was still standing near the cake, arms crossed, her body relaxed in a way that made my blood boil. She looked completely unfazed by the fact that she had just set my entire wedding on fire. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "What the hell was that?" Kayla licked a bit of frosting off her finger, her lips twitching in amusement. "Oh, don't act so dramatic. I just did you a favor." I took a slow breath, trying to push down the surge of anger clawing its way to the surface. You humiliated your own sister in front of everyone and ruined our wedding. What kind of favor is that supposed to be? She raised an eyebrow, tilting her head like she was surprised I hadn't figured it out yet. You were about to marry someone who's been lying to you. You should be thanking me. The room suddenly felt too small, the heat of the stairs around me pressing against my skin. I wanted to believe this was just some sick prank, some twisted, attention-seeking stunt that Kayla had pulled to make herself the center of the night. But if that was true, why had Natalie run? I didn't need to stand here arguing. I needed to find her. Ignoring the whispers and the 100 pairs of eyes watching me, I turned and shoved my way through the crowd, my pulse pounding as I headed toward the hallway leading to the bridal suite. My entire body was tight with adrenaline, my thoughts racing with every worst-case scenario. The more I replayed what had just happened, the clearer it became. Kayla wasn't lying. I reached the door and pushed it open without knocking. Natalie was exactly where I expected her to be, sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, wedding dress bunched around her, looking like her entire world had just collapsed. Her veil had slipped from her head, her perfectly styled hair was coming undone, and the mascara smudges on her face told me she had been crying long before I got here. She looked up when I entered, and that's when I knew. She wasn't angry. She wasn't confused. She looked guilty. My stomach dropped. Natalie. My voice came out hoarse, almost unfamiliar. Tell me this isn't true. She sucked in a shaky breath, her fingers gripping the lace of her dress like she needed something to hold on to. I didn't think she would do this, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering. Didn't think she would do what, Natalie? She looked away, her shoulders shaking. She still wasn't answering me. I took another step forward, my voice lowering. What did you do? She pressed her lips together, her breath uneven, her hands trembling. Then she inhaled sharply, like she was forcing herself to say it. Her next words came out so soft I barely heard them. I never ended it. The floor dropped out from under me. The air rushed from my lungs. Before I could even react, the door behind me swung open. Kayla walked in, her heels clicking against the tile, her smirk widening like she had been waiting for this moment. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Oh, come on, Nat, she said, shaking her head. If you're finally going to admit it, you might as well tell him who it is. Natalie flinched, her breath hitching in her throat. I barely turned my head before Kayla let out a short, satisfied laugh. She's not talking about some random guy, she said, tilting her head. Her next words shattered everything. She's talking about her ex. Kayla's words rang in my ears, loud and suffocating. She's talking about her ex. For a few seconds, I didn't react. I couldn't. My body felt disconnected from my brain, like the moment before a car crash when everything slows down, but you know the impact is coming. I turned toward Natalie, who hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't even lifted her eyes from the floor. She looked like a child who had just been caught stealing. My chest tightened. Tell me she's lying. She sucked in a sharp breath, but no words came out. She just sat there, fingers digging into the fabric of her dress, her shoulders shaking. That was all the confirmation I needed. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Who? Natalie flinched like I had struck her. Kayla let out an exaggerated sigh. Jesus, just tell him. I turned to her, my patience snapping. Shut the F*** up, Kayla. She just smirked. Fine, I'll do it for her. She tilted her head, her voice dripping with amusement. Derek. The name slammed into me like a hammer. My pulse roared in my ears. The room felt smaller, hotter, suffocating. Derek wasn't just some guy from her past. He wasn't some old high school boyfriend, some meaningless fling. He was the one she swore had ruined her, the one she sobbed over when we first got together. He was supposed to be the biggest mistake of her life. And now I was supposed to believe that she had never actually let him go? I could barely get the words out. How long? Natalie covered her mouth with her hand, her body trembling. I took a step forward, my hand shaking. How long, Natalie? Kayla rolled her eyes. Oh, for F***'s sake. For years. The world tilted. I felt like I was going to throw up. For years. We had been together for 5. I let out a slow breath, trying to keep the rage from swallowing me whole. You're telling me that almost our entire relationship, Natalie sobbed. I tried to stop. I wanted to end it so many times. I clenched my jaw, feeling something deep inside me snap. But you didn't. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I thought choosing you would fix it. I thought once we were married, I could finally let him go. I let out a hollow laugh, one that didn't sound like me. And yet, here we are. Natalie's hands trembled. Please, just listen, Kayla scoffed. Oh, off, Nat. You don't get to beg for understanding when you've been screwing him behind his back for years. Natalie turned to her, her face crumbling. You don't understand. Kayla's eyes flashed with fury. Oh, I understand perfectly. You wanted them both. You wanted to play house with your husband while keeping your ex as some dirty little secret, and you thought you'd never get caught. Natalie sobbed harder, but I wasn't listening anymore. Because none of this changed the truth. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what to think. My mind kept looping the same thought over and over, but no matter how many times I replayed it, it didn't make sense. For years, almost our entire relationship, every memory, every milestone, every moment I had cherished, was it all a I lie? I felt sick. Natalie was still crying, her body shaking as she clutched the fabric of her dress like it would somehow save her from the reality she had just created. I should have felt something seeing her like that. Anger, hatred, sadness. But all I felt was numb. Kayla let out a short, bitter laugh. Wow, Nat. You really did it. You actually broke him. Natalie shot her a sharp look through her tears. Kayla, stop. No. You don't get to shut me up now, Kayla snapped, stepping closer. You've been playing this pathetic little game for years, dragging him along while sneaking around with Derek like some lovesick teenager, and for what? Did you really think you were never going to get caught? Natalie turned to me, desperation in her eyes. I was going to tell you. I swear, I was. I cut her off. When? She froze. I took a step closer, my voice low. When were you going to tell me, Natalie? After the wedding? After we bought a house? After we had kids? My throat tightened, my voice threatening to break. Or were you just never going to say anything? Natalie opened her mouth, then closed it, her breath shaking. That was all the answer I needed. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Jesus Christ. Kayla folded her arms. Yeah, welcome to the show, buddy. I shot her a glare. You're enjoying this way too much. Kayla didn't even deny it. I mean, yeah, it's a little satisfying watching her finally crash and burn. She turned to Natalie, her expression twisting. You did this to yourself. Natalie let out a shaky breath, wiping at her face. I know. I clenched my jaw. What does Derek know? She flinched. My stomach dropped. I let out a slow breath, forcing my hands to unclench. Does he know we got married? Natalie hesitated for half a second. Then, in the smallest voice imaginable, she whispered, No. The room spun. Kayla let out a low whistle. Oh wow, that's actually worse than I thought. I felt a sharp, crushing pressure in my chest, like my ribs were caving in. She hadn't even told him. Derek was out there, completely unaware that the woman he was still involved with had just walked down the aisle and married another man. I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to steady the pounding in my head. So let me get this straight. You were with both of us for 4 years, and you didn't tell him you were engaged? You didn't tell him you were planning a wedding? I exhaled sharply. You didn't even tell him that you were getting married today? Natalie shook her head quickly, tears still spilling down her face. No, I didn't tell him, but I was going to. She sucked in a breath, her voice cracking. I just kept waiting for the right time, and it never felt right. Kayla scoffed. Oh my God, you are unbelievable. I didn't respond, because suddenly, everything made sense. The weird moments of hesitation, the times she had seemed distant, the times she had sworn she was just catching up with an old friend. I had been so stupid, so blind, and now I was standing here, legally married to someone who had never even chosen me in the first place. I stood there, staring at the woman I had just married, and realized I didn't know her at all. The Natalie I thought I knew. The one who held my hand when I was sick, who laughed at my dumb jokes, who kissed me like I was the only person in the world, wasn't real. Or maybe she was, but only for me. Someone else had been getting a different version of her this whole time. The thought made my stomach turn. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to keep my breathing steady, but it felt impossible. So what now? My voice was quieter than I expected, but I was too exhausted to be angry anymore. Natalie flinched like she had been waiting for me to scream at her, like my calmness scared her more than my rage. I don't know, she whispered. I never wanted it to go this far. Kayla scoffed. Oh, that makes it better. It just accidentally lasted 4 years? Natalie turned toward her, her face twisted in pain. Kayla, please. But Kayla wasn't having it. No, I'm not going to shut up and pretend this is just a sad little mistake. She looked at me then, her expression unreadable. You know what you have to do, right? I swallowed hard. I don't know anything right now. Kayla tilted her head, letting out a slow breath. Then let me spell it out for you. You can't stay married to her. The words hit me hard, even though I knew they were coming. I turned back to Natalie, who was shaking her head, her eyes wide with desperation. No, she whispered. Please, just let us talk. Without her here. Kayla raised an eyebrow. Oh, now you want privacy? Natalie ignored her, stepping closer to me. I know ed up. I know I don't deserve you, but please, don't throw this away. Not like this. I let out a breath, shaking my head. Natalie, what am I supposed to do? My voice cracked. You want me to just pretend this didn't happen? Tears slipped down her cheeks. No, she swallowed hard. I love you. I swear I do. And if you give me a chance, I'll prove it. I'll cut him off completely. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me. I stared at her, waiting for something inside me to soften, waiting for the part of me that loved her to win. But it didn't. Because no matter how much I had loved her, I would never be able to trust her again. Natalie was still crying, still begging me to give her a chance, but I couldn't hear her anymore. Or maybe I just didn't care to listen. Every word that left her mouth sounded like noise, a desperate attempt to undo the damage she had already done. But there was no going back from this. I had spent years believing she was mine, only mine, when all along, she had been splitting herself between me and someone else. And the worst part? If Kayla hadn't exposed her, she probably never would have stopped. I rubbed a hand down my face, trying to push through the fog in my head. Natalie, you don't love me. Her face crumpled. Yes, I do. I swear I do. I shook my head, my voice flat. No, you loved the idea of me. You loved knowing I was always here, waiting for you, trusting you. You loved having someone who actually believed in you. My throat felt tight. But if you really loved me, this wouldn't have happened. She let out a broken sob, stepping forward like she wanted to reach for me, but I backed away. Kayla let out a satisfied breath. Finally, he gets it. Natalie turned to her, her face twisting in frustration. Kayla, stay out of this. Kayla shrugged. Oh, I think we're way past that. Natalie turned back to me, eyes pleading. Please, don't make this decision because of her. This is about us. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. No, Natalie. This is about you. You made a choice, and now you're dealing with the consequences. She opened her mouth, but I was already moving toward the door. Kayla stepped aside, her arms still crossed, watching the scene unfold like it was a movie she had already seen the ending to. Natalie's voice cracked behind me. Please don't leave. I stopped, gripping the doorframe. For a second, I felt something, a tiny, flickering part of me that still wanted to believe in her. But then I pictured Derek, somewhere out there, completely unaware that the woman he had been with for years had just married someone else. And just like that, the flicker was gone. I turned my head slightly, just enough to let her hear me. You left me first. And then I walked out. But the echoes of what had just happened followed me, pressing against my skull like a headache I couldn't shake. My wedding, the day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life, was over. Not just ruined. Over. I could still hear Natalie crying behind the door, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. If I turned around now, I knew she'd pull me back into her web of half-truths and apologies, and I wasn't about to fall for it again. Kayla walked beside me, her heels clicking against the tile. So, that was disaster. I let out a humorless laugh, shaking my head. Yeah, no sh*t. She glanced over at me. You okay? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to pretend that I was fine, that none of this had broken me, but the truth was, I felt like I was walking in a daze, like my body was moving forward while my mind was still stuck in that room, trying to make sense of everything. No, I admitted, my voice hoarse. But I will be. Kayla nodded, stuffing her hands into the pockets of the silk robe she had thrown on over her ridiculous lingerie. You need a drink. Or 10. I almost laughed. Not exactly in the mood to party. She shrugged. You don't have to party. Just, don't sit in a dark room alone and let this sh*t eat you alive. Trust me, I've been around enough heartbreak to know how that ends. I didn't respond, but I knew she was right. When we stepped back into the reception hall, every pair of eyes turned toward me. The music was still off, the guests still frozen in place, waiting, watching, probably wondering if they had just witnessed the shortest marriage in history. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Then I walked to the microphone. Kayla blinked. Oh, sh*t. You're gonna do a speech? I ignored her. I grabbed the mic, cleared my throat, and spoke. Hey everyone. My voice came out rough, but steady. Thanks for coming. I know this isn't exactly how anyone expected the night to go, but, the wedding is over. So, if you still want to stick around and drink on my dime, go for it. If not, I get it. I paused, letting my gaze sweep over the stunned faces in the crowd. Either way, I'm done here. And with that, I set the mic down and walked out. I walked out of the reception hall, leaving behind the mess, the whispers, the shocked faces of people who had come expecting a celebration but instead got a front-row seat to my entire life collapsing. The cold air hit me as I stepped outside, sharp and bracing. But it didn't clear my head the way I hoped it would. Nothing could. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for a few guests who had already decided they had seen enough. Some of them turned when they saw me, their expressions ranging from pity to disbelief, but I didn't acknowledge them. I didn't need their sympathy. I just needed to be anywhere but here. Kayla followed me out, wrapping her arms around herself as she caught up to me. So, where are you going? I exhaled slowly. I have no idea. She let out a breath of laughter, shaking her head. Great. Love that for you. I walked toward my car, my hands shaking as I reached into my pocket for my keys. I had planned to leave here tonight with my wife, both of us heading to the honeymoon suite, ready to start the rest of our lives together. But now I was alone, standing in a parking lot, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do next. Kayla leaned against the passenger side of my car, watching me. You shouldn't be alone tonight. I huffed out a bitter laugh. Pretty sure Natalie would disagree. She made a face. Yeah, well, I don't really give a sh*t what she thinks. I stared at her for a moment. Kayla, the chaos magnet, the girl who had single-handedly blown up my wedding, the person I had spent the last year barely tolerating, was the only one standing beside me right now, and I didn't know how to feel about that. She sighed, glancing up at the dark sky. Look, I'm not saying let's go party, but you need something to take your mind off of this sh*t. A drink, a distraction, literally anything. I swallowed hard, gripping my keys so tightly my knuckles turned white. Where do you want to go? She smirked. Anywhere but here. I nodded. Yeah, okay. And just like that, I got into the car. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I let myself breathe. I drove without a destination, the weight in my chest pressing down harder with every mile that put distance between me and the disaster I had just walked away from. The roads were empty, just dark stretches of asphalt, and the occasional glow of streetlights casting long shadows over the hood of my car. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and the occasional sigh from Kayla in the passenger seat, shifting like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. I didn't know why I let her come with me. Maybe because she was the only person who wasn't feeding me lies, the only one who hadn't looked at me with pity, the only one who hadn't pretended everything was fine when it wasn't. Or maybe I just didn't want to be alone with my own thoughts. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke. So, are you going to tell me where we're going, or are we just driving until we hit the ocean? I let out a breath. I don't know. She snorted. Wow, incredible plan. Love the detail. I didn't respond. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Kayla sighed, pulling her legs up onto the seat. So, what's the move? Divorce attorney first thing in the morning? Or are you gonna let Natalie cry her way back into your arms? I clenched my jaw. I'm not taking her back. She studied me for a second, then nodded. Good. Silence stretched between us again. I pulled off onto a random exit, slowing down as I reached a gas station on the side of the road. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting a sickly yellow glow over the pavement. Wait here, I muttered, shoving the car into park. Kayla raised an eyebrow. You're getting gas? No, I said, already pushing open the door. I need a drink. She let out a short laugh. Now we're talking. I walked into the store, the smell of cheap coffee and old cigarettes hitting me immediately. The guy behind the counter barely looked up as I grabbed a six-pack from the fridge. My mind still too clouded to focus on anything except the dull throb of exhaustion sitting in my chest. I paid in silence, walking back to the car where Kayla was leaning against the hood, her arms crossed as she watched me. She looked different like this, less smug, less fiery, like the adrenaline of the night had finally burned out. I popped the cap off one of the beers, taking a long sip before handing her another. She took it without hesitation. So, what now? I stared out at the empty road ahead. No idea. And for the first time all night, that didn't scare me as much as I thought it would. I sat on the hood of my car, beer in hand, staring at the empty road stretching ahead. The night air was crisp, cutting through the numbness that had settled in my chest. Kayla sat beside me, her feet resting on the bumper, sipping from her own bottle. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Maybe there was nothing left to say. Maybe I just wasn't ready to talk about the parts of me that still felt like they were cracking open, the raw edges of a life I had been building that had collapsed in a single night. Kayla finally broke the silence. You know, as much as I love a good train wreck, I didn't do this just to ruin your life. I exhaled slowly, turning the bottle in my hands. Then why? She tilted her head back, staring at the stars. Because she was never going to tell you, and you deserve to know the truth. I let that sink in. As much as I wanted to hate her for how she did it, for the theatrics, the public humiliation, the absolute spectacle she had made of my wedding, she was right. Natalie would have let me marry her, knowing she still had one foot in another life. She would have kept lying, as long as she could get away with it. And maybe, in some twisted way, Kayla had saved me from something worse. I took another sip of beer. I guess I should say thanks. She smirked. You should, but I'm not holding my breath. I huffed out something close to a laugh, shaking my head. You're I'm a menace. She clinked her bottle against mine. And don't you forget it. We sat there, letting the night stretch on, both of us knowing that when the sun came up, I'd have to start dealing with the wreckage. Lawyers. Annulments. Moving out of the place that was supposed to be our home. The inevitable moment when I'd have to face Natalie one last time. But not tonight. Tonight, I wasn't a betrayed husband. I wasn't the guy who had just had his life torn apart. I was just a man sitting under the stars, drinking with the one person who had told me the truth. And for now, that was enough. The end.